Today we're going to focus on one of our beloved cities in this region, Minneapolis. This city is home to so many sports teams, corporations, musical groups, and tourist attractions. There are plenty of people that don't know about what it takes behind the scenes to make Minneapolis a fun place to visit. To talk more about this work, we're excited to welcome Jenn Schaal, Director of Partnership Marketing for Meet Minneapolis, to this episode. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So before we get started, tell us a little more about yourself, your background, where you're from, and where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have lived in Minneapolis for 23 years.
Wow.
I lived in St. Paul for like 5, but that doesn't really count. I moved here when I was 18 years old for college. So I actually went to the University of Minnesota. So now I've lived here more than half my life. So I feel like I can say that I'm from here almost.
Yeah.
Let's see, what can I tell you? I live in Northeast Minneapolis, a neighborhood that's really known for kind of the arts district and kind of cultural districts, lots of great food, diverse populations. I work for Meet Minneapolis, which is a convention and visitors bureau for the city. So what a great job to be able to sell and market and talk about the city in which you live, in which you work, in which you play, in which you do everything. It's basically like the most amazing opportunity to be able to sell something you feel so passionate about. I think, especially in Minnesota, what's interesting is you're not from here, so to talk about this with you is so great. But the tie that people have to where they're from or where they live, the Minnesota Pride brand, is huge. As someone that's an outsider, well, not for 23 years, but for someone who moved here, I find it really fascinating that when people travel who live here, they say that they're from Minnesota. They don't necessarily say they're from Minneapolis or St. Paul. Like we had the Minnesota Super Bowl. All of our teams are Minnesota. There's nothing that's specific to Minneapolis. And so we are trying to basically create that brand, make people aware of Minneapolis as a destination to live and work and visit and do their business here, and kind of put it on the map. So I think we're doing a pretty okay job of that.
I think so. With the Super Bowl and Final Four. And all these big things coming. There's a big Lutheran youth gathering that's coming to town.
They were here over in July. Yeah, 22,000 youth Lutherans. So 22,000, just to give you an idea, we have 9,300 hotel rooms in downtown Minneapolis. So we had to extend. I mean, you can imagine 22,000. They were in Bloomington. They were in St. Paul. They were in St. Louis Park. And then they bussed in and light railed in and everything to do their big meetings at U.S. Bank Stadium.
I remember being a little high schooler and went to one of those Lutheran youth gatherings in New Orleans. Yeah. It was like, wow.
In your matching T-shirts.
Yeah. It's crazy. They're all walking around in their backpacks. Yep. It's kind of funny. Okay, so you kind of got into it a little bit. Yeah. But there's people that are listening right now that probably don't know anything about what a convention and visitors bureau does, what Minneapolis is. It brings a lot of great things to our city. But talk a little bit more about what you do, and you can get a little more in depth if you want. But.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to first talk about how we exist. Because I think that's really a big common misconception is that we're funded by, like we're part of the city or we're, tax dollar funded. And in theory, we are funded by tax dollars, but it's not the tax dollars of people who necessarily live here. So when you come and stay in a hotel, this is a very simple version of it. But when you come and stay in a hotel in the city of Minneapolis, there's a hotel tax that's generated on your stay. You probably see it when you look at the receipt. You think, what is that for? That hotel tax in this location is collected by the state of Minnesota, which is then allocated to the city of Minneapolis into its general fund, which then comes to us through a contract that we have with the city of Minneapolis that's supported by 4 very specific KPIs that we are tied to and measured on. So we're actually a 501c6, a business nonprofit, think like a chamber of commerce or anything like that. And so through the contract that we have with the city of Minneapolis, the 4 KPIs that we are measured on include booking $20.5 million of revenue into the Minneapolis Convention Center, which is actually a city-owned building. So the city hires us to be their sales and marketing arm for the convention center. KPI 2 and 3 have to do with the amount of hotel room nights that we book. So between group, convention, as well as leisure travelers, so, someone who's coming for a wedding or to visit friends, 625,000 hotel room nights booked in 2019. So that's not room nights that are realizing in 2019, but in subsequent years. And then the fourth KPI is bringing in 2.7 million in private revenue. So we do that. We're a membership-based organization, so we, which is, I'll get into that, which is more my role. But our members pay dues. We have sponsorship opportunities through the work that we do in the convention center. We have a visitor center on the corner of 5th and Nicollet, right outside that light rail station there. Lots of great Minneapolis and Minnesota tchotchkes you can get there. We also have a lot of local artisan goods. We partner with Minnesota Makers, which has a permanent store in Robbinsdale, and it's all locally made artist gifts and whatnot. So if you're looking for that special something to get someone who, loves Minneapolis, you can definitely find it there. And then, through digital marketing and our own assets, as well as some of the groups that we bring into town, there's some sponsorship opportunities around that as well. So those are the KPIs that we're tied to per our contract with the city that gets us the funding that we need to do the work that we do. Outside of that, of course, there is a plethora of things that we do that aren't part of that contract. So if you've ever been to our website, and I guarantee everybody has, they maybe just don't know that it's our website. It's minneapolis.org. If you type in, you Google things to do in Minneapolis, or, best sushi in Uptown, or any of that, we're constantly creating content for how people are searching on Google, so that we can give people who live here, work here, visit here, relevant information that they're looking for to make sure that their experience here is the absolute best. We also have a team of folks who are marketing the destination, selling the destination, meaning boots on the ground across the country, even internationally, to get folks to choose to do business here in Minneapolis. So whether that's, a 50-person family reunion all the way to the 22,000 Lutherans that were here this summer, so local, national, international. We don't have a budget for a large marketing campaign, and you've probably seen, like, in this market, Portland often comes in and does a big media campaign, so you'll see billboards.
There was recently a one for Omaha all over the light rails. I was like, interesting.
Omaha, yeah, who knew?
Let's go to Omaha.
Yeah, right. So we don't do that. We don't have the budget to be able to do that. So what we do is we invest in our people, and so the success that we've been able to have is really because people have their boots on the ground and are forming relationships with associations and groups and whatnot to bring them in, see Minneapolis, and decide that, hey, we want to bring our people here. And you might think, like, wow, Minneapolis is, well, I think it's beautiful year round. But for some folks,
come a certain, few months out of the year.
Yeah, I mean, right. And we have to lean into that, right? Because it's a reality. We live here. It snows. It doesn't snow in July.
No.
But it snows in February and sometimes April, and sometimes October. But we're really leaning into that, like, from a winter tourism standpoint. And so that's an initiative of ours as well. We have no problem getting people here between April and October. It's kind of that other outside of it. Yeah. As far as what I do specifically with the partnership team at Meet Minneapolis, we are basically the connection between local business, our organization, and the groups and business that we're booking into Minneapolis. So, restaurants, attractions, hotels, retail, service providers, anybody that's an AV or printing or florists or, event production companies, basically anything that you would think would be relevant to an event, even, translators, those are our service providers. So they become a member with us because they want to have access to what we're bringing into the city.
Right.
So they, there are some benefits to that, including we create a convention calendar that's a password protected document. So folks can see every single group that's coming over the next 2 years, who their meeting planner is, so they can connect with those folks directly and, pitch their services or, use it as a prospecting tool. We also send out leads and referrals directly. So as our sales team books the business, then it moves to our services team, who's basically the folks that are supposed to, make good on everything that the sales team has promised and make it a reality. But they're also connecting folks with our partners as well. And certainly we talk about everybody, but our partners really get first priority to that, meaning, if someone is booking business into Minneapolis, they need an offsite venue and a caterer or transportation, and they don't want to have to do that work themselves, which who would want to in a market that they're not familiar with? They go to our services team, who then sends out these leads directly to all of our partners that provide those services, and they're qualified. So then the partner can work directly with the client to, potentially submit a proposal or, secure that business. So we're helping bring business not only into the convention center and hotels and venues, but also connecting that on the local level. And the reason why tourism is important is because when folks come in to stay in Minneapolis and they're staying in those hotels, that entertainment tax or that hospitality tax that's included, that those are incremental tax dollars that help us support infrastructure in the city, so that residents who live and work here, that's not coming out of their own pockets. So, you'll hear oftentimes, a large event is coming. This is the estimated economic impact that it will have. Those dollars then are able to be used by the city to improve the streets or, right. Public safety, all of those things that are important and we would have to do anyway, but they're created by dollars from people who don't live here.
Right.
So,
through those taxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
People don't often get that.
Yeah. It's really cool about how you guys are able to tie, bring a local perspective or a local market into such large scale events, right? So you're able to partner with these local organizations that are able to make these larger events with people that, aren't from here, go off well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I think travel has changed and, obviously Airbnb and Lyft and all these things that have kind of come to fruition over time has changed how people want to travel. And I don't know about you, but I'd be interested to hear what your preference is. I think when I travel for business, I'm often in a hotel just because of where the meetings are or whatever, it's usually in that same space. So there's a great rate that goes along with that. When I travel for leisure, I'm always in an Airbnb because I want to be in the neighborhood. I want to experience the location like people who live there experience it. I think when you think traditionally around a downtown, how they are set up, like the convention center, there's usually a few specific restaurants that you see around there that are usually pretty the same in every city. Yeah. But like I want to branch out and eat the food and drink the beer and whatnot. That is what the people who live there do and experience it that way.
Yeah, I think since you asked.
Yes.
I'm more of I've dabbled a little bit with Airbnb.
Ooh.
I went on a work trip in June with a colleague and we stayed at an Airbnb. And that was because we wanted to stay in a neighborhood and also because it's amazing how much conference hotels can get sometimes in certain cities.
Same.
I won't
especially
out the
depending
city,
on when you book.
Right. And even farther enough out. I mean, it was amazing. It was like $360 a night for the conference hotel. And it wasn't even the best hotel. Right. So then it was kind of like, we're not staying in this.
Yes.
We're going to go out and do an Airbnb, which ended up being way cheaper. But personally,
and a totally different experience.
Totally right.
Like you certainly don't have someone coming in and making your bed and cleaning your room for you every day.
Yeah.
But
it was nice.
You can hang out on a couch.
Yeah, and be in a neighborhood and watch your sitcom and feel like you're in your own home. But like when I travel and I'm staying in like a Minneapolis or something, and I'm doing a lot of things downtown, I'll usually stay in a hotel just because it's a little more convenient. But I know a lot of people are moving towards that model of Airbnb, and I mean I Uber everywhere. Right. Or Lyft.
Yeah, I'm a Lyft gal.
Yeah,
so
I do either one. In Minneapolis, I've found Uber's a little bit more consistent for me in
Really?
South Minneapolis. Yeah, like especially if I'm going to the airport early in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. It works different for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and from a hotel standpoint, like Airbnb is certainly on the map, but by far people still stay in hotels much more.
Oh yeah.
It's just it's a different thing. Like my parents will never stay in an Airbnb.
Same. They don't understand why I go to Starbucks in the morning.
Yes.
You can make your own pot of coffee at home.
Yeah, not the same. It's the experience. That's what it is. I just was in a marketing seminar and they were talking about the experience. It's like the commodity is coffee. Like you could do so many things with that. But you go to Starbucks or whatever coffee
Spy
shop.
House, for that experience.
Gray Fox, in my building every day. They know me by name, which is a curse and a blessing. For the experience, they talked about how, Americans are taking less and less vacation. But if you consider vacation as the time that you're not at work or you're not at home, then like going to the coffee shop ultimately is like a tiny vacation.
Right, because it's an experience you're having.
And I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Well, good. I wanted to ask a little bit, because I'm sure there's people wondering, you mentioned the Super Bowl.
Yes.
How does your organization
do that?
Yeah. Like, who said, okay, we're bringing the Super Bowl to Minnesota. Boom, done. Or Final Four is coming in this, the year after. So how do you do it?
Yes. So the process starts usually, from a sports entity. So we partner, the Vikings, US Bank Stadium, because actually the Super Bowl was secured before US Bank Stadium even was built. So we secured the Super Bowl for 2018 in 2014. And so, I know, I remember, because I was working at a completely different job and had no idea that I would even 4 years later be part of that. So wow, what a full circle moment. But it was when US Bank Stadium had been announced that it was being built, but it hadn't yet started. And so that's typically something that happens, is that the NFL will usually go somewhere with a newer stadium and whatnot. So the Vikings and our CEO, Melvin Tennant from Meet Minneapolis, and he's also the executive director of Sports Minneapolis, which is our sports arm. So it's a separate organization, but it's powered by Meet Minneapolis. So we do a lot of shared services. Worked to create a bid that then they present to the NFL. And so we had a couple of local, really important business folks. Marilyn Carlson Nelson was involved in that. And certainly the Vikings, everybody over there. And so we create basically a bid book that we need to go present. And that's basically like, here's our ideas. This is the commitment from the city. This is the commitment from, a lot of it is proprietary information, based on rates and things and the hotels that we have and venues and all of that. And then the NFL basically decides who, there's a top 3 cities, and then it's a big thing. People fly in and they decide who it's going to go to. And so it was like, I can't remember who the other 2 finalists were, but we were the only statewide entity for that. So Minnesota Super Bowl. Like, I always talk about this because I find it really fascinating. Like, you've never heard of the Louisiana Super Bowl, right, or the New York Super Bowl, or, Wisconsin will never have a Super Bowl, but like those types of things. Right. But in Minnesota, for many reasons, it was, and the most important reason of that is the corporate commitment that we needed to raise in order to bring that event here. And while we, like the Twin Cities and the metro area is certainly a hub for many headquarter companies here, we really needed to take that effort statewide in order to be able to get that. And so that's really where that Minnesota Super Bowl came from. But I think that's just an interesting fact that literally you'll probably never ever hear another Super Bowl referred to by the state.
Right. It was always the New Orleans Super Bowl.
Right.
And it was there a few times.
But even the teams, like, think about the teams. Like, it's never, I feel like we're the only state that has all of that as a team. And I do believe that stems from kind of the Scandinavian heritage of, the folks that settled here. And, it's like, we don't need to leave anybody out. Like, let's just all be a nice, happy group. Like, no one needs to stand out. Right. Let's just all, so Minnesota. Where are you from? Minnesota. Okay, cool. Like, we're within that. Anyway.
Don't worry about that.
Yes. It's fascinating to me, though. And so from there, when we secured that bid, then we created a host committee. So it's a separate LLC. And you probably saw all the hoopla, the Minnesota Super Bowl host committee. It's basically, like I said, a separate LLC. They create an entire staff, and they're the ones that really work to make the event happen. We are part of that, but it's not, all of our staff. So we certainly had folks that were on those committees and involved in the planning and process of that. But the interesting thing about creating a host committee, and the same thing happened for the Final Four as well, is that they're basically a company, but they're doing everything for the first time and they're only doing it once.
Right.
So
it's
like
disband, I would imagine.
Yes. Yep. They dissolve. And so creating, like, imagine if you had a company where you had to do this and you never had an opportunity to do the same thing again, but improve upon maybe the challenges that you faced and whatnot. So you're always kind of recreating the wheel in that regard. And then as far as, corporate sponsorship for the Super Bowl, they brought in $62 million in corporate support to be able to make that happen. So it was not only just getting the game here and, paying the staff and, all of the things that they need to pay for, the marketing and all of that. But Super Bowl Live, which was the event that happened on Nicollet Mall, that was all driven by the host committee as well. Yeah. So,
U.S. Bank and Target.
Yep. And so with the Super Bowl, so a company like U.S. Bank, let's see, U.S. Bank's a bad example because they were a different type of partner, but I'm trying to think who were some of the activations. Polaris was down on Nicollet Mall. So not only did they have to pay for that opportunity to be on Nicollet Mall during that Fan Fest activation, but then they also had to pay for whatever the activation was that they were doing. So
which was that jump, right?
Yep. So, it's a huge investment. Clearly, it's worth it because what that did for us is it really elevated Minneapolis and Minnesota and St. Paul and Bloomington onto the world stage as far as a place where we can not only do this type of event, but we can do it successfully. We can do it when it's -20 outside and people have fun. And it really went off without a hitch. And so because that type of event happens, we're able to attract other types of events because, suddenly Minneapolis is sort of top of mind for many folks. And so travel writers really picked up on what we were doing. And suddenly Minneapolis started appearing on places to visit and, the food scene and the music scene. And, clearly those are both really great things about us. But, Condé Nast was picking up stuff about us. Vogue, Esquire, like a lot of national, international media, which was really, really cool. And that's all a result. So it's like it all... it's kind of like all boats float sort of thing. The one thing I'll say about large events like that too is, especially on the local level, there's definitely challenges around that too, because the NFL especially is a very corporate entity, the NCAA as well. So they have their own sponsors that are coming in to do their own, private parties and activations in it. And that's a certain kind of audience that, I don't know about your socioeconomic status, but I'm certainly not part of that audience, right? I'm not a millionaire. I don't that's not my jam. I wish it was, but it's not. And so those folks aren't necessarily the same type of person that would, venture into Northeast and, experience the local food scene per se, right?
I understand, yeah.
And especially when you're coming as part of a large event like that, and think about how you travel. If you're going to go to an event like that, there's usually other things that you're already expected to attend or, tied to based on your commitment and whatnot. So on the local level, it was interesting just to have a lot of conversations with folks who, kind of had this expectation that business was going to be amazing and this was going to be great. And while that certainly happened for some folks, like Manny's blew it out of the water. That's so great. But then my regular coffee shop, which is in the Skyway at the time when we were officing on this end of town, was really hurting during that 10 days of Super Bowl because employers in downtown had
shut down.
Yeah, and recommended that their employees work from home. And while I understand the sentiment of that, and nobody wants to get stuck in traffic and whatnot, it really hurt kind of our local economy in that way because they weren't even getting their regular customers to come in. So while, never necessarily expecting that they were going to get a Super Bowl crowd, it was just then they weren't really getting, their Jenn Schaals visiting them to get coffee. So for the Final Four, we really worked hard to communicate with business, to encourage their employees to stay, that this was an exciting time for the city and why wouldn't you want to be a part of that and experience what's going on and, celebrate that. because we didn't want to hurt local business in that way. Certainly depending on what you were, you definitely benefited from those events, but we really just wanted to try to equalize that playing field. So,
all right. So can you tell us, do you have any, don't divulge any secrets.
Okay.
But do you have anything else coming to the Twin Cities that's big and fun?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly no secrets. Yes. So we have many NCAA events that are on the docket for the next few years, certainly. In March, we're actually welcoming the men's wrestling championships. And that's actually taking place at US Bank Stadium. So for the first time at a stadium versus an arena, which is really cool because it's actually allowed the NCAA to basically double its audience.
Yeah.
Just based on seats and whatnot. So that'll be huge. There's a really incredible following for the wrestling championships. Who knew? Now everybody knows. But yeah, so like hotels are full, all of that, which is great. And we've got the X Games for the final year next summer, just over here, US Bank Stadium. And then let's see, looking into like 2022, I know we have in 2021, we've got a regional men's Final Four game that will take place here. In 2022, we're hosting the women's NCAA Final Four.
Oh, that'll be fun.
It'll be really fun. It's actually the start of the 50th anniversary of Title IX.
Oh, wow.
So being able to incorporate that and with women's sport and whatnot. So.
And I know in June of because I'm a little bit involved with it. But in June of 2021, another Lutheran youth gathering is coming to US Bank Stadium.
Yes.
These Lutherans just, multiply up here.
I mean, I can't, well, true story. The Scandinavian.
That's right. Oli and Lena, right?
Yes.
Those jokes.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, this was fun talking about all this.
Yeah.
It's amazing to hear all of the, it just fascinates me that all these companies or groups or corporations that bring their conferences or their sporting events or whatever to the city from outside, and we're still able to partner with local organizations, small businesses, mom and pop shops, all the way up to corporate clients. And I just think that that's really cool. It's like you said, it makes Minnesota really special to be able to include everybody and to work with everybody. I think that's really cool.
Yes.
So thanks for chatting with us about that.
Thank you.
All right. So now,
trivia.
This is the time
I'm
where
ready.
we play a little game. Okay. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Oh boy.
They won't be too difficult.
Okay.
They're typically about Minnesota or current happenings. I think most of them today are all about Minnesota.
Okay.
So you've lived here long enough. I think you can
hope
probably
so.
answer all of
them. All right.
And then for everyone that you get right, we make a donation to House of Charity.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a local nonprofit.
I'm familiar. Yeah.
That helps people achieve independence. It's an organization that's close to Charleston's heart, and so.
So I really can't mess this up.
Well, we'll help you along.
Okay.
Okay. You ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
All right. Here's number 1. Which of Minnesota's 67, which is a very fascinating number, state parks is the most visited?
Oh,
it's right by the airport.
Okay, Minnehaha.
No.
Oh, it's Fort Snelling.
Yes.
Okay.
Fort Snelling. I didn't realize there were that many state parks in Minnesota.
Well, I feel like Minnesota's a big state,
right.
And in the northern.
That's right. There's only room for state parks.
Yes, there's a lot of land.
All right, good. Number 2, in 1988, Twin Cities-based Northwest Airlines was the first major airline to ban what?
Smoking.
Yes. Wow, that was fast. Fast response. All right.
Except on international flights, probably.
Oh, probably.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
It was gross.
That's a long time to be stuck in a cabin with cigarette smoke.
And it was 2 specific seats. You got to, if you sat in this 2, in one row, you could smoke. I remember that.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. I just think it's funny. Some of the airplanes now, I'm getting off topic, but I was just on a flight last week, had the ashtray still in the back of the airplane.
Like, how old is this plane?
I'm like, no one's been smoking on these planes for 20 years. All right. Number 3. A statue of a legendary TV icon whose widely popular TV show was based in Minneapolis sits at the corner of 7th Street and Nicollet Mall in downtown Minneapolis. Name that TV
Mary
star.
Tyler Moore.
Yes.
And I know that because when Nicollet Mall was under construction over the last couple of years and just reopened about a year ago, Mary Tyler Moore actually lived inside at the Minneapolis, Meet Minneapolis Visitor Center on 5th and Nicollet.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So when she passed away, that was actually while the statue was in our space. We actually had national media come in to talk about
she
her.
was a very popular
She did die,
icon.
right? I mean, she did.
Yeah,
okay, good.
Yeah, she passed away.
What if she didn't?
Well, I can guarantee she's probably not going to
There
listen to
was
this
something where they brought flowers. Okay.
Well, good. That was fun. See, all three. There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks for playing with us.
No, thank you.
So yeah, again, great work that you guys are doing, and we're really excited to see what the city can bring. I mean,
awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah.